Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Opinionated SEO Opinions, and this time we are joined by wonderful Paige Ford of Netflix. And everybody should know that we really want to talk about the productions of Netflix, but I was told that this is going to be enterprise in-house SEO related episode. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us, Paige.
So happy to be here.
Wonderful. Not more than we are, I think. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So my name is Paige Ford, and I currently lead SEO strategy at Netflix. I have worked in SEO for the past 11 years now. It's been 11 years. And I've worked in agency roles, in-house roles, both at enterprise companies and startups. And in between roles, I've also done consulting, SEO consulting on the side. And so just really excited to be here and talk about enterprise SEO.
Yay, perfect. So we also have our hosts, Sam Torres and Tori Gray of the Grey Duck Company. Welcome, ladies. How are you feeling today?
Hello. I'm ready. I'm so excited.
Happy to
Yes.
hear about all
Perfect.
your tips and tricks, Paige, for
Yes.
enterprise SEO life.
For sure.
So let me dig right in without further ado. So Paige, what does a day in an enterprise in-house SEO's life look like for you?
So I think throughout my career, I like to call myself an SEO generalist. I do both product SEO strategy, a little bit of technical SEO, as well as SEO content strategy, even within Netflix. And so, and I like to do a typical week because I feel like the day to day is so varied. So in a typical week for my role, I would say about half of what I do is really around the planning aspect of SEO. So there's things like, developing roadmaps, cross-team planning, really understanding what we want to do for the next quarter, the next year, and even 3 years ahead of time. So it's a lot of fun of, project prioritization, getting the right teams in, budgeting in terms of, the different projects you want to tackle is probably about 50% of the work that I do. In a given week, because I do both, technical SEO, product SEO, as well as content strategy, the other half of my time, I'm working with either an engineering or product team and designers. We're doing sprints. I'm reviewing or writing specs and technical requirements for SEO for new features we're launching. We might be doing some QAing that week for any type of feature we're releasing. And then the other part of my time, I'm meeting with a lot of writing teams. So I'm, meeting with editors. We have various writing teams for the different types of content we're creating. And so within those types of meetings, I'm doing things like SEO best practices across the company or SEO training. We're looking at, how is our content performing from a more content strategy perspective? What's working, what's not working, what type of direction do we want to take? So a little bit of a mix of everything. I'm with engineers some half the time. I'm with writers and creatives some other times, with folks like PR and marketing. So very, very generalist when it comes to the SEO world. And I would like to say maybe like the last 5% of my time, once in a while, maybe once a month, lately it's been like once a week, we're dealing with some bugs. There's some issues on Google. We're exploring what's going on. That's sometimes my favorite part of SEO is like, hey, it's something's broken. How do we go about fixing it? And sometimes it's the most frustrating part of SEO. Like, this is really broken and I don't know what's going on. So I think that's about, what my week looks like.
Putting out those fires.
Exactly.
Always fun. What team are you embedded on right now, or have you been embedded on? Like, are you on product or?
I'm currently embedded in a product team, but throughout my career, I've been embedded in both marketing orgs and product teams.
I'd love to hear more about your experience in one versus the other and how they're different, and like what maybe things you emphasized or what was more and less successful on each side of the fence there.
Yeah, so I think both could be very, very successful. It really depends on the business model, essentially, and where an SEO team can have the most success. And where you see those challenges is when your SEO team is embedded within part of the company where they can't have that much impact. So when I've been embedded with marketing, we've had great success because it made sense for SEO to be closer to those teams. And when I've been embedded in product, also great success because it made sense to be there. So I'm going to throw out some examples where I think it makes a lot of sense for SEO to be within product. I like to say, like, maybe if the business itself, if the product itself is really about content discovery, I'm going to throw out some fun companies I admire in terms of their SEO, things like Amazon or Yelp or Pinterest or Wayfair. I know they have a really amazing SEO team. when you can have the biggest impact embedded with your engineers and with your designers and your product teams, that's where I think it makes a lot of sense for SEO to be. In other cases, let's say your business is just a service. Maybe you have 2 or 3 products, and the core value SEO brings is really all about that community building, that content strategy, how you're embedded with your marketing and PR teams. Then it probably doesn't make sense to have SEO embedded in a sort of product team. So I think it works really well if you really understand how SEO can have impact. And I know in some other organizations, they're in both. You have a purely content focused SEO team, really embedded with your writing teams, really embedded with your marketing teams. And you have your separate product SEO team driving more of that product strategy. Totally. Personally, I'll speak from a personal aspect. I really love like product strategy and how you can use SEO to really scale your efforts across multiple teams and maybe even multiple regions. So I personally really love being embedded with product teams and having impact in that way.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've chatted about this before, but I've also had a similar experience being like successful being embedded on the product team, especially from the technical perspective, or like when scale matters, because then technical SEO matters a lot more, right? So making those product decisions, things happen in QA, you need to be embedded with engineering to investigate and figure out what the core cause of that thing is, whether it's directly in Google or if, you know, something broke on the site. If you don't mind sharing it, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm curious, what's like the most weird, fun fire you've put out at any org, really?
Oh, wow. Where to begin?
I just love these stories, so bring them all.
Yeah, so there's been fire. The worst is when you have to put a fire out that you were the cause of. So I will share a fire that I caused. And that I had to put out. This was years ago. This is when I was still learning how parameters really worked, and how I think I don't use it much today, but back in the day, Google Search Console had an ability for you to like even control like the blocking and crawling of parameters. And a long time ago, on one of the sites that I worked on, we used parameters for language, and it was a redirecting parameter. So what happened was we would detect your language, and we would redirect you. Say you came on the English page, you say, oh, your browser's in French. We would redirect you to the French page. And we had a little parameter that said like, you know, French. And so we were blocking those parameters from search. The problem was because we were blocking those parameters, sometimes Google would hit a URL with a parameter and it was blocked in search. So half our pages weren't being crawled. We just had pages blocked from Google's search engine. So I had the great idea of how about I just stop blocking those parameters and we stop using them. So I want to stop using parameters and stop blocking them so all of our content can be indexed. I mean, we had millions of parameters because we support a lot of different languages. So once I unblocked these parameters, all of them got indexed. And what happened was you would search, say you were searching like, you know, what is Google? And you see in English, it says, what is Google? But I had a parameter of French. Folks would click that link and automatically be redirected to the wrong language. And this happened across like millions of pages. And it was such a nightmare. I remember that day spending hours just like removing pages from the index because all of our users were getting to the wrong language. And I learned very, very strong lesson that I learned is don't unblock parameters until you've completely cleaned up all your internal linking, all of the way these pages are indexed. And it was a fire of my own causing.
Yeah. We've all been there, but that's that one must have been fun to sort through. But I mean, it also sounds like there was technical complications there. The many people's mistake coming together to create chaos.
Yeah. But we've definitely solved it since then. So all of for that one site I worked on, we stopped using language parameters. We had actual localized URLs. We did no forced redirects. We cleaned up all of our internal links, but it took a week. I think it was a week of me manually de-indexing like hundreds of pages. Yeah.
Wow. So fun.
That's wild.
Also, in general, the dangers of what Google says not to do, the redirecting people based on language things, like this is why things just go awry. Or one of the ways they go wrong.
Yeah. But still also, it makes me kind of like, I miss some of those tools. Like when we used to have, like,
we had so much control. Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell it whether it was pagination or no, this is a filter versus a sort. I always thought that that was like the level of granular detail of like, what kind of parameter is this? And what sort of page changes are happening here? And I never really got the sense that it made a difference. I don't know, but it was fun to sort out and to think about like, what is the difference between maybe it wasn't filtering and sorting, it might have been filtering versus segmenting. So like, what's the difference there, and how does Google approach this? It was fun to dig into weird angles like that.
It at least made me feel like I was having an impact. And maybe it was just a placebo effect, but at least I got to feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And I'm helping Google better understand us. But who knows at this point?
Who knows?
Who knows? They took it away anyway. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with next, because they're doing stuff right now, right? They're deploying new things, and that's why everything right now in GSC, we can't fix any errors. None of the not the inspect, but the validation processes are working right now. And it's very annoying.
It is. I agree.
Disagree.
Yeah.
So bringing it conversation, yes, back to its core. I like Paige, from the first sentence that you started forming, you dropped so many keywords and so many focus points that we're really interested in. So I'm really curious to like discover which one is going to be the first. And I just prioritization. So how do you prioritize your work, and how do you get the budget and buy-in from management?
Oh, this is like the question everyone wants to know the answer to. And I sometimes I'm still figuring out like how do we get more and more investment in this space? But what's worked for me in the past for prioritizing my work is I talk the least about SEO. I don't mention any SEO buzzwords. It's really not about SEO for me. It's about, at the end of the day, I take a step back. What is the business trying to accomplish this quarter or this year, and really focusing on like what are our top goals, our North Star goals, and then working backwards of like, how does SEO fit into this? And does SEO even fit into this? I think sometimes it's an SEO, and I really struggle with this. I think SEO can solve all of our problems, but sometimes it can't. So where does SEO really impact the business, and really having a clear understanding and being able to articulate that to your stakeholders and to leadership, I think is just really, really key. So I first start, what are we trying to accomplish this year? And then where can SEO help fit in some of these goals? And so I don't talk about SEO tactics. It's really like very high level, like what are we trying to accomplish? And so once we answer those questions, in some parts of the business goals, SEO won't have much impact at all. And other parts, like we really think we can impact this area. And so when we answer those questions, that's when I start doing the fun part, the brainstorming. What are the SEO tactics that are going to get us there? And then you do your fun matrix of impact, versus effort. Like these are like the 3 main things we want to do. Which one has the most impact for the least amount of effort? And that's when we can start thinking through like, what teams do we need to support us? What does resourcing look like? What does our timeline look like? And then the very last piece, measurement. How are we going to measure this to then ladder it back up to the business's goals? So once you can like clear, and it's very simple. I get the most success when I keep it as simple as possible, and really can explain complex SEO concepts in a way that non-SEOs can understand. I've seen a lot of success in that method. And once you've done all that, it's communication, especially in large organizations. There's so many folks that you need to make sure, know like, what are you planning on doing? As you're doing it, communicating what you're doing. Everyone needs to know like all the work that's going on. And the last piece is communicating what you've done. So really just doing that communication loop. And using the language of the business. So so when I'm reporting on SEO, I don't ever say things like our rankings or indexing, or sometimes I don't even mention page speed or core web vitals in certain aspects. Engineers care obviously, but VPs don't care at all. So just really making sure you're using the language and tailoring your message to the right audience.
What's that?
I feel like that's just such a life skill, like regardless of where you work, like being able to manage up. A lot of it is just like adjusting your language or your lexicon to what really matters to them. And I'd say, you know, managing up or even just managing across and communicating with other teams, right? So how, like, do you feel like you're constantly, sorry, I'm just fascinated because like you talk to so many different teams and there's probably so many different goals that I feel I'm like, probably half your week is actually just switching your brain into
that is half my week. Yeah.
Like,
that is definitely half my week.
Like, do you have any tips or like anything that has helped you along the way as far as being able to just like at the drop of a dime, like I'm talking to a VP, now I'm talking to engineering, now I'm talking to product, like how does that switch go for you? Or do you feel like there's prep work you sometimes have to do in between? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, such a great question. I think, and to be honest, it can also be exhausting when you're constantly having to context switch. But at the end of the day, I just love SEO, so it's still fun. And it did take me a lot of practice, trial and error. I remember earlier on in my career, my biggest challenge was I would just talk about just SEO all day long, and people are like, "What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying." And so it took me a really good amount of just practice of like, how do I speak about complex topics in a way that just resonates with people? And it's really all about storytelling and painting the picture. I'm a very visual person as well. So anytime I'm talking to anyone, whether it's a VP or a writer or engineer, I pull up Google, I share my screen. I'm like, let me walk you through what this looks like. And so I've gotten just really, and it's fun. I love teaching SEO. And so, you know, whenever I walk into a meeting, my very first question is, how much about SEO do you know? What do you know about SEO? Because some folks surprise you, they know a ton. Those are my favorite people. When I meet an engineer that has worked on SEO projects, it's love at first sight. It's really great. And a lot of writers that I work with know a lot about SEO. That's their career. You know, they have to know SEO. So I always start off like, how much do you know about SEO? And depending on their answer, I already know like how to tailor my messaging. Like if they're already an expert, I just dive right in. If they know nothing about SEO, I speak about it in a way that makes sense to what they're working on a daily basis. How does this relate to their work? And so it's just, you know, it's trial and error, it's practice. You know, you can see, especially, you know, visually, you can see like what's resonating with people's faces, and how they're understanding your message. And so it's fun. Now it's fun for me. I love it. I love talking to everyone and anyone about SEO, but it definitely took some time to get there.
Totally. So you've spoken a little bit about like talking to like different, basically seniority, not seniorities, but like the level of their understanding of SEO. Like what about when you're talking to product versus engineering versus, you know, someone with a consulting background? Are there any specific things that you're like, okay, for this audience X and this audience Y?
So for higher up product folks, a lot of product folks obviously understand the concept of SEO. And so what they're looking to you to just be that subject matter expert. They're like, I know the concepts. I need you to you're the expert in the room. So I need you to tell me, you know, that's when you get to the details, exactly what we need to do to get there. Engineers, half the time they know a ton about SEO, so you can just dive right into the technical aspects. And a lot of times too, engineers know more than me. You know, I'm like, this is the concept. This is what we want to achieve. I'm going to lean on you to really tell me, how do we get there? And so that's my favorite part, because, you know, engineers, they know what they're doing. Versus consultants, I love learning from folks. I'm like, hey, we're both in the same room. We both do the same work. This is my perspective. Tell me yours. Like, what am I missing here? What are the things that you've thought about? So for me, with SEO consultants, it's always a learning experience. We all have so much different experience in the different types of projects we worked on. And so selfishly, I'm like, teach me what I don't know. Let's learn from each other. So it's just how I tailor my different conversations. Even with engineers, I do this too. I do SEO trainings programs within this company. And so I have different trainings for different audiences. Here's a training for writers, a training for VPs, and a training for engineers and designers, where we get really into the technical details. And it's so much fun. I'm like, because I'm excited even thinking about it now. I love when I just see people's eyes open and they're like, wow, SEO is cool. And I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. And you get to work on it now. So there are a lot of engineers and data scientists that know nothing about SEO, but obviously they're experts in their realm. And so how do they take their expertise and apply it to the SEO space is always a fun part of my job as well.
Yeah.
That's
no,
amazing.
that sounds super fun. And I also feel like one of the things that makes enterprise different is the amount of internal education. And like, I feel like even for our own clients, like we have some enterprise clients, we have some smaller, like some startup clients, like there's just such a shift as far as like how much time is dedicated to education or training. And maybe it's just because like startups, it's they move fast and break things mentality that so many of them have. That you're just going and you don't really take the time to really stop and make sure everybody's on the same page all the time. Whereas with enterprise, like even just what you were talking about earlier, if you're even doing 3-year plans, which for SEO is kind of like, it's all going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just I love to me, that's just one of the things that actually are different about enterprise is that you are taking the time to really do a lot more education and communication and bring, just like you say, bring in those experts and like, how do you apply what you do? Because like, obviously your data scientists, they know so much more about how to mine the data and find the nuggets, right? So yeah, just really cool.
Well, I'd love to talk more about that. We care a lot about using SEO data sources for SEO applications, but also for non-SEO applications. So if you're getting to work with the data science team, without obviously giving away any state secrets here, what kinds of things are you exploring with the data science team that can overlap with SEO?
Yeah, I think mostly around, the impact of SEO and measuring, more directly measuring our efforts, I think is a really big piece of the work that they do.
Totally, that makes sense.
So here's an irrelevant question. Does your role include playing with the internal search?
Sort of. So I do internal search optimization and strategy when it comes to content strategy outside of like our actual main product. So our main product search, I don't touch at all. That's its own team, but we do look at internal search for trends, especially around even our customer service, like what are people searching for help within our own network. So we do look into that data to optimize and use it for content optimization and trends for sure. So people definitely look into your internal search data. It's a treasure trove because the reason why I love internal search data so much is you don't actually really have that data in your Google Search Console, because Google Search Console only shows you what people search for when they come to your site, right? Versus internal search is everything they're searching for, whether you can solve that problem or not. So it's a really great data source.
That's awesome. That's good. And so that's both in terms of like content programming, it sounds like, but also in terms of like customer service.
Mostly for customer service. I think our content programming is like, a whole other, so we're not really necessarily impacting that, but really around customer service, I think is a really good use case for it, especially for the enterprise SEO. Like if you're at a large company, you're going to have a lot of internal search data to really understand the issues people are having and what they need help with. And so we do use that data to optimize content.
Yeah, love that. Too many companies underfund their customer service in general, so people actually taking the time to know what their customers want and invest in that. We talked a little bit about where you've been embedded as an SEO. I'm also curious if you've seen different team structures. Like, have you been a part of, is everything very like product versus engineering, or have you been like a part of an OBT team, or like what other maybe team structures have you seen or been a part of? And
so one team, there's 3 main types of teams that I've been a part of. One is I've been on a product team, so really working on building features that support SEO, which is my favorite. I've definitely been on your general like marketing teams and embedded in. I've actually been embedded in a content team as well. So we had a content team really all about with our writers, editors, and I was like one SEO specialist. So we're working as a unit. Another team that was really interesting that I know was a popular model at some companies, I was on a centralized web team that everyone had to go through to then get on the web. So that was really more of like a product marketing type function, type role. So we weren't really impacting the product itself. We did technical SEO and product releases for more around the marketing aspect of the business. But the team was centralized. So all these various product teams had to go through this one team to then control the web experience. And that was a lot of fun because you were definitely in the room all the time because you were working with the marketing managers, the engineers supporting that web experience. So you're definitely in the room and those centralized. I think where I've struggled in certain teams is when it's decentralized, where you have different folks doing different types of SEO across the company, you're kind of competing with each other. And so I'm biased towards, I love centralized teams, whether it's a design team, a writing team, an SEO team. You can be doing different things, but I think having a centralized team really helps defeat those duplicate efforts. And it's with enterprise SEO, that is like one of the biggest pain points. Duplicate efforts, people doing the same thing across different types of teams and expecting them all of themselves to rank number one on Google. I'm like, there's only one number one spot. Let's make sure we're all working together to get to really optimize what that looks like. So I'm just a really big proponent of a centralized teams, whether it makes sense for them to sit in marketing or a centralized web team or on a product team.
Yeah, a lot of working cross-functionally, obviously, with other SEO teams or everyone, because you have to be influential everywhere. It's you're busy.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's fun busy, right? It's like it's a lot of fun work because I still remember vividly when I first started in my SEO career. I remember very vividly the very first time I was in an agency at the time, and we got a client ranking number one for a very, very competitive keyword. And we rung the bell. It's like such a huge celebration. And to this day, that's still very, very exciting. Like, I just love the end result of it. If you've been working on a project and you're just there, you're where people are, they're searching for you, they're coming to you. You can see that increase in traffic. You've made other teams really happy. Like, wow, this really worked. And it's still to this day, 10 years later, a very fun part of the job. And so it's very busy, but it's also just very rewarding in that sense that it's fun work.
So selfish question here. I'd love to know if you've ever worked with SEO agencies as a part of your in-house role at any org, and what advice might you have for us who orgs who like to work with in-house teams? Like, how do we best support you? How do we make those relationships solid? Share your wisdom.
Yeah, so I've worked with agencies in my past 3 in-house roles, multiple agencies. Really, I've worked with a lot of great agencies, and I think it's been a while since I've been in agencies. So I can definitely speak from the client perspective. I think my biggest advice for agencies, and this is something that I struggle with as an in-house as well, so I think it's advice for in-house SEOs as well, is context, giving the SEO agency the information that they need. And it's really easy as an in-house person, everything that's happening, but it's really easy to forget that they don't know everything that's happening. So it's all, for me, number one piece is communication, context. And my advice for agencies is to ask for that context. Like, hey, what don't I know? Like, what am I missing? And what areas can our partnership actually have control over? I've been in so many cases where agencies give me really, really great, solid, these are what you should do. This is what we recommend. I'm like, that's great. Can't get that on the roadmap this year. It's just not going to happen. So I think really having those communications, what is doable, and sharing that context. And then that then leads to my other advice for in-house SEOs really is, set clear expectations and deliverables, because I think a lot of SEO, it's a long game, right? And agencies they know what they're talking about, they're brilliant, but having those clear goals and deliverables, because I think to be honest, half the time what we need to be doing and what the agency is recommending, we can't do. And so really understand what does success look like here when we can't really do half the things that you're recommending. So just having those really clear expectations and deliverables, I think will make a really great working relationship. And then something I love to do, this might be just our company culture, but I always like to ask for feedback as well, because I think it's a partnership. It's not necessarily the agency's working for me. It's a partnership. We're trying to both get to the same goals. And so I always want to know, how's our working relationship? How are we doing? Are we giving you the information that you need? Are we, executing on somebody's recommendation and making sure you can have a really open and honest dialogue? Because at the end of the day, we're working towards the same goal.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's so much when you're working in-house, when it's such a focus of being a member of the team and supporting the business as a whole. And like at an agency, it's so easy because you're outside of it to forget that, I don't know, like you're so focused on like, no, I need to prove results or I'm going to get fired. So I need to do the big things. And if I can't do those, like what is my value here? And forgetting that there is value in, I don't know, like good QA, like not losing traffic is valuable. You need to like help the org understand the value of that. But those sorts of pieces and how they fit in and how they, I don't know, consulting and understanding level of effort or getting creative workarounds or what can we do instead when, your roadmap that you want to do, you just keep hearing no to. That is such a critical piece. Are there
Which
particular...
I definitely think the larger the company, the more likely you're going to get no. You're like, I'll do that in 2 years. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. It's a lot.
Actually,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, this was something that we recently discussed internally, and then we realized that Tom Critchlow actually shared this in his SEO MBA newsletter as well. He was saying that some companies just keep saying no to things and they have a set agenda. So even when they're working with agencies, they don't really expect results and they keep hiring them. But there are some like in-house teams that are hiring agencies, and even though they see some progress and that progress is very valuable and like acceptable, they just close the deals and shut the doors at the end of
yeah. So another thing too, I love to like define like, what does success in this relationship look like? Because it's not just results, it's also like, there's deliverables that are beyond just an increase in traffic, right? So just really setting those guidelines, like what does success look like, knowing that half the things you recommend we're not gonna be able to do. That's just how it is in a very large organization.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and understanding why, to your point, Paige, of like communication, like why can't those things happen? We have these other business initiatives. And then like, if you understand the roadblocks, maybe you can get more creative about what workarounds mean or what work you can do instead. How can you move the needle if you don't have those big points? And this is where sometimes I feel in-house SEOs are a lot more, in some ways, creative than agency SEOs, because they have to stare at the same problem year after year after year and keep coming up with new and innovative ways around these roadblocks. How do you keep moving the needle?
I love that you said that, because I'm going to share a really big pet peeve of mine is when I see folks audit sites or audit brands, like these are all the things they're doing wrong. And what I like to tell people, like every SEO knows what they need to do. Like every SEO, like we all, especially in-house in agencies, we all have like a whole laundry list of the things that we want to get accomplished. And I think that's not the challenge. The challenge isn't knowing what to do. I think the challenge is like, how do you get it done? And so when I work with an agency, it's, to be honest, it's not really like, we know what we need to do. It's that creative piece of like, how can we get it done? Like, what are the creative ways we can work around these things? What are some other things we can tackle that we actually have direct control over? In certain aspects, like how can you even help us get it done? Like, do you have, your own data science team or your own engineering resources that can like work around these things? So it's always about like, we all know what needs to be done. It's like, how do we prioritize it? How do we show the value? Oh, that's another thing. My biggest thing I love working with agencies is they help me show the value. They can help me bring that business case to the appropriate stakeholders. Like, so how do we show the value of the space? And it's really, really difficult, as we all know, to really, forecast SEO, but that's a huge piece of I think it's really helpful working with agencies.
Yeah, that's great. Even from the agency side, it's interesting to think about how your relationship with an org is really controlled by whoever your in-house person is and their level of success. How influential are they in the org? And like, how can you be influential one step away? But some things just aren't in your control. And if you can't talk to that VP, because that VP is just never going to make time for you to get in the door, like, how can you equip that person with what they need to be, what you need to move the program forward.
Exactly.
Totally.
Super fun challenges. Well, any parting last advice for us or the community as a whole?
Oh, tough.
Enterprise SEO tips.
Enterprise SEO tips. I think my biggest tip is get really, really comfortable talking less about SEO and more about the business. I think as soon as I learned that little trick of like speaking, it sounds really simple, but I think it's a little bit harder in practice. My biggest tip is, picking up the MBA speak, understand like how the company really, really thinks versus, your SEO checklist. I think that can really hold folks back when you're thinking about a checklist, but really thinking through like what's important for the business and having that conversation with folks.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an important point, like meeting people where they are, which is something we lecture clients about in terms of their keyword research, right? Like we're always telling them like, you want to rank for this, but actually you should be going after this because this is what your customers are looking for. So it's such an interesting disconnect that like everyone makes this mistake. And hopefully we're all getting better over time at remembering these are people. They don't have all the context in our heads, right? Going back to your point about context. So good. Well, thank you for taking the time with us and sharing all these wonderful insights.
No, wait a second. I really want to ask a final question.
Of course.
About
this has been so much fun.
Whether you have, because you said communication is very important and you have to speak to different teams and just understand how they really think about things and what resonates with them. So do you have any special ways that you developed when you are communicating with different persons in the organization that have really worked for you? So people have been saying that like you have to, what is it called? Bribing people in the organization or buying them chocolates and stuff. But is it really the only way that you should be doing this?
I love that you brought that up. That's kind of I kind of do bribe people. That's kind of true. So the way I like to, and it's easy because in my organization, we over communicate. So we write like memos and documents for everything. I have specific presentations for every single type of audience. Like it's really about, and I say these things like I'm an expert at it. I'm still getting better at it as well. Like how do I tailor my message? But the bribing piece is really true. The way I've been most successful is I go to different groups and I present to them like, hey, this is how SEO can help you. And then I do it. So I have won over so many, friends and allies because I have done work specifically for them. I think, and it really depends. Like in some organizations, you don't really have to sell the value of SEO. They already know the value of SEO. And other times you do, you have to build trust in SEO itself as a practice. And so I go to these different teams. I'm like, what do they care about? And how can I be selfless? This is extra work on my part, right? I'm very selfless. Like, how can I do SEO work just for them? And so a really great example is we have we use, and I think Tori, we've worked on this. We use SEO for more than just SEO. We use SEO as like user research. And so I've done user research projects for other teams. I'm like, hey, this is how SEO data can help you. We can use SEO data to like name a new product feature, to think through brand naming. And so working with those teams, using SEO for other creative ways to help these teams. And they're like, wow, thanks, Paige. This is great. Wow, we love SEO. And so you just really build up that reputation within the company of not just yourself, but of the practice itself. And it's bribing, doing quote unquote free work for other teams is a little bit of bribing. I do it all the time.
Yeah, because when Tori and I have bribed, it's like we're bringing cookies, chocolate, like
you're being entertaining. You're being like the host of, yes, engineers, I want you to work on this feature, so please stay late and work on this. I will bring cookies and I will be sparkling entertainment for you. Like, yeah, it takes all kinds.
Yeah, it's really all about relationship building as well. Like, so for me, it's like, I love building great relationships with engineers. We are the best of friends. And it gets to the point where engineers will literally say, hey, Paige, I'm going to do this for you because I like you. I'm going to prioritize this work for you because I enjoy
We're humans.
Yeah, exactly. We are humans. So like, make friends with people. If people enjoy working with you, they will also help you prioritize your work. So that's a good tip as well. Just, yeah. So I love relationship building as well.
I am loving every single word you're saying. And I think I don't know if you met Roxana Stingo yet, but if you ever meet her or if you have met her, I think you would be the greatest of friends.
I've heard of her. I think we've chatted like briefly over Slack or something.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do a group session.
Putting Paige and Roxana in a room together. Woo!
Yeah, that'd be fun.
There's going to be magic coming out of that. That'd be amazing.
Yes, I know.
She's great. I think she's actually helped me a few times when I had questions. Like she's very active and great. Yeah.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone again for coming to Opinionated SEO Opinions. We had such a wonderful time with you, Paige. We're really grateful. If anyone has any questions for us, they can submit them to thegray.company/ask SEO questions. Also, if you have guests or subjects you want to hear more from us, let us know. And anything else?
No, just thank you so much for inviting me. This is so much fun.